The verse of the day is Genesis 22:12, and it says, "Don't lay a hand on the boy," the angel said. "Do not hurt him in any way, for now I know that you truly fear God. You have not withheld from me even your son, your only son." So we've been going through the story of Abraham, and spoiler alert, God gives them a son, and his name is Isaac. So Isaac has been born, he's grown up a little bit, and now the most infamous story in the Bible, I don't know if infamous is the right word, very famous story in the Bible is today's verse, and the story of God asking Abraham to sacrifice his only son, which can be spoken in our lives today so easily because Abraham's son represents an answer to prayer, represents a miracle in his life, something that he's desired for years and years and years, that he waited 25 years to get. And God asked him to sacrifice it. He tested Abraham's faith to see, will you really obey me when you don't want to do something? Will you really obey me when you don't have all the details? And Abraham did. Abraham did obey him. He was going to sacrifice his only son because God said so. And that proved to God that Abraham's faith had been perfected, or that he is truly someone who fears the Lord. And you might be like, okay, what does fearing the Lord mean? That sounds a little scary. Fearing God is simply a reverence, a respect. It's a knowing that God is first in your life, that you want to put him first, that you have to put him first because you know without God, your life would be in shambles. Without God, you would be led astray and doing things that would just bring harm to who you are. So it's knowing that God and his word and what he says is first in your life compared to everything. Genesis 22:1 says, "Sometime later, God tested Abraham's faith. Abraham, God called. Yes, he replied, here I am. He said, take your son, your only son, yes, Isaac, whom you love so much, and go to the land of Moriah. Go and sacrifice him as a burnt offering on one of the mountains, which I will show you." So Abraham goes. He's obedient. He's about to kill his son, and an angel stops him before he does it and says, today's verse, "Don't lay a hand on the boy." The angel said, "Do not hurt him in any way, for now I know that you truly fear God." I was doing some homework before this, and I read how God tested Abraham 10 times. This was his 10th time being tested, and he passed the test in the final run when he had to be tested with his greatest gift, his greatest miracle. I think that's the heart posture we need to have when God gives us good gifts and he answers our prayers. And with anything that we have in life or that we desire, we have to make sure that God is above that desire. Because if it's not, then those things, those prayers, those dreams, those desires become idols in our life. Because anything above God, anything you prioritize above God becomes an idol. And you might be like, okay, what is an idol? An idol is something that you worship. And you might be like, okay, well, I don't like worship these dreams or desires. But worship is a heart posture of how you live your life. The desires of your heart, whatever you prioritize and love and give your time to, are the things that you worship. Our lives are worship. Worship isn't just singing songs. How we live our life is giving worship to God or not. I think the fact that this was his 10th test is actually very important to remember because it took a lot of things to build Abraham's faith. Everything in Abraham's life was intentional to grow and stretch and refine and build Abraham's faith to get him to a point where, in today's verse, he will even sacrifice the greatest thing in his life because God says so. I think it's also important to remember that God will test your faith. He will never tempt you. There's a difference between testing and being tempted, because God isn't tempted. Being tempted comes from the evil one to give into ways that bring sin into our life. God will test our faith to prove to ourselves where we're at. Because the more we become clear about where we're at in our faith, the more we see God in our life, the more we learn more about God, the more we're able to see that it's God that provides and gives us everything that we need. It's not the things and the desires of our heart that bring us the things that we need. Because when we put our trust in the things of this world or people, places, and things, we get trapped. we get disappointed because those things never fulfill us. But when we put our trust in God and when we go through trials like Abraham did and tests like today's verse, it proves to ourselves where our heart is. And so because Abraham got to go through this, even though it was probably extremely difficult to have to think that you're going to sacrifice your son, to see God show up and stop him and provide a ram after God said, don't touch the boy, he provided a sacrifice in the wilderness, wherever he was, and it was a ram in the bush. So he provided an alternative option. And if I were to experience something like this, it would deepen my faith. It would strengthen my confidence, not only in myself, in my ability to follow God's lead, but it would strengthen my faith in who God is, that he is provider, that he is a man of his word, that he is trustworthy, that he is real, that he is speaking to me. And so the trials in our life and the tests in our life really prove to ourselves where we're at, where we can grow, and how far we've come. Because the devil's biggest plan is to try to get us to doubt ourselves, right? He wants us to think that we're not capable of listening, following God, building in our faith, of knowing who we are and what we're meant to do. God does things in our lives to remind us that we are doing well. Here, look, your faith has been proved, that you will be obedient, that you do fear me, that you are doing a good job. And it's because Abraham went through a lot of trials in his life that got him to where he is today. And that's how God uses everything for good. That's how he uses every hard day for good, because it really does refine and build our character to a place where we can see, oh, I am fearing God. I do have a lot of faith. Going back to verse 1, where it says, God tested Abraham's faith. Abraham, God called. Yes, he replied, here I am. I think that verse is powerful because God called out to Abraham and Abraham instantly answered. In order for us to answer God's call or to listen well, we have to know what God's voice sounds like, right? We have to be paying attention. The devil also wants to distract us and prevent us from paying attention and prevent us from hearing God's voice. In order to hear God's voice, you have to be listening. In order to be listening, you have to want to listen. And I think this is why daily relationship is so important, and taking time to practice listening and practice being present with him, because then you're going to hear when God calls. You're going to hear when he calls your name and gives you instruction to do something. And that in itself is going to develop relationship and help you pay more attention to growing with God on a daily basis. So today's verse really reminds us to be obedient, to grow in relationship, and to put nothing above him, okay?